As you can see, I've just got round to editing the video footage. The surface has been left bright because that's the way the client wanted it, but it's very easy to make it look aged if necessary. Now this is interesting. You see that perspex under the cramps? That's known as a hot core, and the perspex is heated up and then applied to the prepared surface, which has animal glue and also the brass inlay. The cramps are done up and the glue melts. See how thin these pieces are, these little bits like that bit there. Now, as you can see, I'm now preparing one of the pieces that has come out. The reason the brass is cast off and lifts from the surface is because the wood has shrunk, and that leaves no room for the brass other than just to lift. Now, as brass ages, it gets rather hard and springy, and it won't lay down no matter what you do. So you have to anneal it, and you anneal the metal by heating its red heat, and that makes it soft, and that allows you to flatten the surface, and it takes the spite out of the metal. Now you can see I'm cleaning the surface there with wire wool, and I've used a little bit of sulfuric acid, and that removes that pink stuff, and the pink stuff is copper. And that makes it really, really clean and very, very shiny. It has to be clean, otherwise it won't stick. Now, an interesting point is a lot of people use araldite to stick wool down, and that is not the way to go. It's extremely difficult to remove. It has to be removed mechanically. You can't use solvents, because if you use solvents, then it creeps underneath all the loose veneer, and that means you can't lay the veneer subsequently from that. And the other thing is it doesn't stick. It won't stick brass. The only thing that sticks brass satisfactorily is animal glue or hide glue. The surface has to be very clean. Now here you can see I'm flattening the brass with a burnisher. Now that's high carbon steel and it's been polished, and that means that it's a really high finish surface, and it doesn't damage the brass, it just polishes it a bit. It enables you to remove all of the little humps and bumps that it's accumulated over a bad period of its life. You've got to be a bit careful that you don't overwork the surface, because if you do, if you keep pressing with that burnisher, it'll actually harden the metal and then it becomes springy again, and that's not the condition you want. You need it to lay comfortably and flat in the space that was made for it. To make sure it's dead flat, or as flat as you can get it. Taking the twists out of the metal. Now, this is an interesting hammer. It's known as a dead blow mallet. It's filled with lead shot. What that means is it doesn't bounce back. It just, when you tap it down, it stays down. And you'll see that white head on the mallet. Well, that's nylon, and that's quite soft. And that means it's not going to stretch the brass any more than it's already been stretched. And you'll see I'm doing it really gingerly here, not bashing too hard. as the brass was cast off from the shrunken wood, that means the brass, as I said before, is too big for the space that was made for it. And you find that with a lot of the brass you have to shorten it just a little bit, just to accommodate the shrinkage of the wood, so then it fits nicely. When it's placed in its in the space that it was made for it, it has to fit comfortably without any spite, and it makes life a lot easier, and it also means it will last without being cast off again. See that other tool lying on the bench there, that's also a burnisher, but it's a different shape. Burnishers are very useful tools to have. Quite a long and tedious job to do, but it has to be done right, otherwise it just won't lie properly. Whilst animal glue will stick it, it hasn't got the strength of the universe. It has its limitations, but it's a lot better than araldite. Animal glue has amazing properties. You have to heat it, and that makes it nice and warm and runny. And then when it goes cold, it gels. So you can prepare the surface that the metal is going to fit into by just brushing the glue into place and letting it just gel. Then the brass can be placed in its correct position. And then you apply, as said before, a hot coal, and the hot coal then melts the glue and squishes out the surplus glue, and the coal's left in place overnight for the glue to set. Another amazing property of this glue is it can take quite large glue spaces. It can take up quite a bit of space. It's a good gap filler. The other thing is it can be rejuvenated, which is great, just using water. And that can be used for advantage, particularly when you're laying the tortoiseshell veneer. Here I'm using pliers to twist the metal to make sure it takes away that. See, there's quite a large twist there. There we are, it's gone. There we are. I'll deal with that piece a little later. Let me find where it fits. I'm going to make up a nice fresh batch of animal glue. It's also known as hide glue and Scotch glue. It comes in these little granules, and I'm going to put it into one of these syringes. These are 60 milliliter syringes. Now what I'm going to do is empty that one into this one, I think. There's always a recipe for chucking it all over the place and all over yourself. Just put that little bung in the end. There we are. Take the bung that one. Put some of that in there. That's still quite nice. Now there's going to be a couple of strengths of glue I'm going to make up here. It's going to be really concentrated in this particular syringe. So a little wooden peg goes into there. It's incredibly sticky stuff. There we are. I'm going to pour some of this warm water into the syringe. Hopefully it won't go all over the table. Just pour it in all over the table as well, yes. There we are, that's nice and thick. Just take the end out, get rid of the air. Then I'll leave this to soak for probably about an hour, 2 hours, and it'll all dissolve. Getting rid of all the air there. Now, secondly, I'm going to make up a really thin solution, and this is what I'm going to use to penetrate underneath the existing loose veneer tortoiseshell. Right, so that's coming out of there. That's going in there. Yes, the mess has started. This stuff is so very, very sticky and it gets everywhere. Right, now I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to put a little bit of methylated spirits in this, and that will reduce the surface tension, and it'll enable the glue to creep under the surface. I'll put some more of this goo in here, but I want this to be quite nice and thin, so I'm going to put a small amount in. Right, now I'm going to get a bit of water in that now. Nice warm water. Get rid of the air. And then just shake it up a bit. Those little white bits are the methylated spirit, which hasn't gone into solution yet. It will do. Now that's pretty runny, but I may need to add more water to that in a minute. Now if I don't remove all of the bubbles and then you put it into the heater, the air expands and then the goo comes out and it goes everywhere. There we are. I'll bring it back in there. Just remove some of the mess. Get rid of the air from this. There we are. Now that can go in there. So now we've got some which is relatively thin, some which is very thick. It will come in handy in a minute. You can see here rather a lot of cramps are used. These are a particularly useful type of cramp. And those are extensions to the clamp, and you can see the perspex that's being used as the hot coal there, being held down by the cramp. That's a very useful thermostatically controlled hot air gun, which I use. That's the top after it's been laid and cleaned with pumice powder. And this is the drawer, one of the drawers. You can see that not only the tortoiseshell's lifting, but also the, there you are, there's some nice araldite, which can only be removed using mechanical means. Now this is using perspex again as a coal. The advantage is you can actually have a curve in it. You heat it up and then you put the cramps on and it holds everything down in place in that particular curve. Again, you can see the cramps being used on perspex here over that curved surface. And this is the leg, and you can see the condition of this of the leg. It's pretty poor, and it does pose quite a few problems. Now, those cramps that are holding perspex down, again, the perspex is bent into the form of the leg. Now this is the filler I'm using. It's a special mix of wax, carnauba wax, beeswax, and pigment. And I'm using this hot air gun to put heat locally. Now, there's quite a skill in making this wax. You can see here how you can actually blend the wax colour so that it looks like blotches. You can get the hot air gun, and then after it's been put in place, then you can scrape it off with a soft plastic scraper, so that's not going to do any damage. You see how you can use the hot air gun there just to blend the wax, the two little pigments, so that they spread like little blotches. Now this is the cabinet cleaned up, and we've used ionic cleaning on the component parts. It doesn't do any damage, and this is the finished item. So you can see the top, it's been polished, and those are the legs. Ionic cleaning is particularly useful because it won't do any damage to any of the gold. It's non-mechanical, and it lifts any of the oxide off the surface. Now if it's too bright for the client, then as I said before, it can be made it can be dulled down a little bit by using pigments. It's rather a nice cabinet. You can see the gold is still mostly intact on the cabriole legs, and it has a slide. So altogether quite a nice project.